Focusing is about saying no. Steve Jobs. All right. Welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. Today, what do we have? Got a mixed bag of things. That's what the Random Dad Musings is. It's where rather than spend the whole show on one topic, we just kind of go over a random group of things, whatever they may be, somewhere between 3 and 5, somewhere. So I think we got 4 items today to cover. So let's see, what should we get to first? Let's start with this trad life. So on social media, there seems to be a lot of like trad wives, and sometimes like these accounts that are like, "Oh, I'm a trad wife," and there's this and they say these things, right? And and I think they lead people to believe what something about trad life that really isn't all that true. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, trad life is short for traditional life, and it's kind of like this harkening back to the to the good old days, if you will. And so I want to play something very quick. I'm not going to play the whole clip; it's about 5 minutes, but I'm actually just going to play a small portion of it. But before I play that, let me show you something from social media that I thought was kind of interesting. So let me go ahead and pull that up. Let's see, where did that go? That was a very good. Oh, I should have had this one queued up, and I didn't. I just kind of thought of it at the very last moment. All right, so here it is, and I'm going to put it up on the screen so that you can also take a look. All right, so there we are. And let me scroll down a little bit so you get some better context of who I'm responding to or what, the comment that I'm responding to first. So this person says, "My husband has never changed a diaper because he's not an emasculated American gender flipped husband suffering under the thumb of the matriarchy. And actually, most men I know in real life have well ordered relationships, who have well ordered relationships are like this. Americans are delusional. They don't respect fathers unless they behave like mothers." That's just crazy. So what I said in response, I said 2 a.m. diarrhea to the cries of "Daddy." I was there. Bloody nose after slipping and falling. I was there. Ants crawling all over his legs. I was there. Do you remember the ants crawling all over your legs, little buddy? He says he does. Well, who knows? I will continue to be there, and I don't give a darn what some fake trad mouthpiece has to say. So let me just kind of lay this out here. Whatever you vision trad life is probably not it unless it's boring because there is nothing glamorous about everyday life, like just this trad life. There's just nothing exciting about it. I grew up, my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom. She had a job early on, like when I was younger, but then there was a certain point where she was just a stay-at-home mom. And there was really nothing glamorous. Like she would wake up, she would, make breakfast, and, get us out to school. And then she would, do whatever house chores needed to be done. She would go to the library, she would read books, she would watch Oprah. My mama loved some Oprah. Okay. And then we would come home and she would ask us how our day was and, eventually start dinner. And then my dad, who worked third shift at the time, or at least for a good portion of this time, he would wake up and she would tell him about her day. We would have dinner. Then we would, maybe watch some TV, and then dad would go to work. We would go to bed, wash, rinse, repeat. Right. Like there was really nothing glamorous about it. Right. And that was the trad life as I understand it. So there's nothing really glamorous about it. And so I see all these accounts on there that are trying to like talk in this really weird, bizarre way about like what husbands should do. And I laughed because I was like, who was I telling? I was telling my friend yesterday at lunch. I was talking about this, and I was like, it's so weird because I would think that a trad wife, an actual real trad wife, wouldn't really care what I do. like not mine. I mean, somebody else's trad wife. They wouldn't care what I would do. They're like, "Oh, okay." I mean, they might if they were talking like, if it was my wife's girlfriend and they were talking and, maybe my wife was all like, "Well, yeah, man, I wish you would take out the trash more often and I wouldn't have to ask him." Like those kind of things I think are normal. And in that particular context, yeah, somebody might actually care because somebody that they care about is talking about it. So therefore they would care. But to get on the internet and just to randomly tell people like, "Hey, if you're a man and you take care of your children, well, you're emasculated. Like, you should be a real man." And well, I don't know. I don't know what the real man is supposed to do if he's not, taking care of his children when he can. And don't get me wrong, guys. I get it. Some of y'all got to work. You don't. Yeah, I work from home, so I have a little bit more, a little bit more privilege here, if you will. Um, to do some of these things. I'm a little bit more present than some dads might be. Like my grew up, my dad had to go to work, and then he came home and he was tired and needed to relax a little bit. So I get it. I get it. But in as much as you can be, I think it's good to participate in the rearing of your child. And I don't think that there's anything non-trad about that or lacking masculinity. And to that, I would say, well, if you want masculinity, how about these bananas? I'll do what I please. And you, woman who I'm not married to and don't care about, I don't care what you have to say. How about that for masculinity? I'll do what I please. So there. But let me play this clip here because I thought this was kind of interesting and a little bit sad, actually. So let's see here. Let's get that up on the screen and bam.
Some people are not content with the rise of trad life. They don't like it. One of whom is my friend, Lauren Southern. Lauren Southern just has this really interesting interview, this exchange in Unheard, written by Mary Harrington. And it's about how she tried the trad life and it didn't really work for her. It's worth reading. Here's just a little snippet. Lauren talks about how she got married within 4 months of knowing a guy at the age of 22. She writes, there were warning signs from early on. If I ever disagreed with him in any capacity, he'd just disappear for days at a time. I remember there were nights where he'd call me worthless and pathetic, then get in his car and leave, which is obviously awful, awful stuff. What kind of man speaks to a woman that way? But she didn't see them, thanks to the simplified anti-feminist ideology she'd absorbed and promoted. Lauren says, I had this delusional view of relationships that only women could be the ones that make or break them and men can do no wrong. So she didn't spot the red flags, even as they became more extreme. He'd lock me out of the house. I remember having to knock on the neighbor's door on rainy nights because he'd get upset and drive off without unlocking the house. It was very strange to go from being this public figure on stage with people clapping to the girl crying, knocking on someone's door with no home to get into, being abandoned with a baby. But as she tells it, the nightmare began in earnest when he was offered a work opportunity in his home country of Australia a few weeks after the birth of their baby. She did not want to leave her support networks behind, but he used the political and religious importance she placed on lifelong marriage as a lever to force her to agree. Whenever I wouldn't do something, he would say, I'm going to divorce you. So feeling she had no other option, she assented. Okay, so that's
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there because I don't really want to play the whole thing, because a lot of it's his own commentary. None of that, absolutely none of that, is what I would consider to be trad life. Because I said at the very beginning, trad life is kind of boring. It's kind of routine. You just do certain things because that's the responsibility you have, right? And it's up to each couple to identify what things work for them. So in this particular household, I do the majority of the cooking, and it's because I like it. I enjoy it, not because I'm emasculated. I came into the relationship cooking, and I just have always enjoyed cooking. So therefore, I do it. I do other things that might be considered more masculine, like I go out and I work in the yard, and that's like I enjoy it, and that's fun, but it's routine, right? Like cleaning up leaves out of the yard because we've got like 11 oak trees. Cleaning up leaves is pretty routine. I mean, it's pretty trad too, to go out and rake your yard or mow your yard or whatever it is that you do out in the yard. That's just routine. Wiping, snotty noses, cleaning dirty diapers, practicing, lessons, school lessons, whether it's reading or phonics or piano lessons, these things are routine and kind of boring. That's the trad life, right? Like, and I'm not trying to say like it's bad. I'm just saying it's boring in the sense that it's not exciting when it comes to the internet. Nobody, like, you don't really see, and maybe we should. Maybe this needs to be what we see. Maybe we need to see people get excited about teaching their kid to read, or teaching their child to play the piano, right? Or and I do that sometimes. Like, you'll sometimes see posts where I'll post, a video or a photograph of me and the little guy here doing something kind of fun, and something kind of fun sometimes is routine. Sometimes I'll just post a picture and be like, hey, we were out doing yard work today. Pretty routine and boring, but hey, we enjoyed it. We had fun together, and call it a day. So to me, when I think of trad life, that's what I think of. And I actually had an interesting comment. I don't know if I can pull it up on short notice, and I should have had this one at the ready as well, but that's okay. We'll see if I can. We'll see if I can pull it up, because I feel like I summarized what a lot of people view as trad life very succinctly just the other day when I made a comment to a friend of mine. Let me see if I can pull that comment up. Where did it go? Oh man, it was a great comment. I think I think I did a really good job. Sometimes I'm really pleased with some of my comments that I make, and it looks like I'm online too much because I can't find it right away. So I don't know where it went. Oh, man, that's a bummer. That's okay. Well, anyway, so when we talk about trad life, I think we need to have a conversation that it's actually kind of boring. And yeah, you agree? Anyway, so there's nothing exciting. So if you see one of those influencers on there and they're like, and they're like, hey, this is trad life, and you're not a real man or you're not a real woman, disregard those. Just let those ones go, because honestly, you're not going to get anything of value from it. Anyway, so let's move on. What else do we have in our little bag today to talk about? Oh yeah, this was great. So this is okay. So one of a while back, probably a year ago, Libertarian Party of Florida put on candidate training for candidates, and they did it up here in the Northeast. And there was I can't remember the organization, but the organization came in and they were given all these. It was a presentation. It was like a several hour presentation where we sat and we listened and we had lunch breaks and stuff like that. And or I think it was like all day. It was like an all day Saturday thing. And one of the things that really stuck out in my mind is they said, look, if you're a candidate and a journalist, how they say it? They said, no, they said, if you're not a candidate, they said, if you walk in as an activist, or even like a journalist, and not the candidate, but the a politician smiles at you or waves at you or in some way is excited to see you, they said, you're doing it wrong. They said they should grimace when you walk in, like, "Oh, man, he's here or she's here again. This is gonna be rough." Right? And the idea being that if we're on such friendly terms that they don't kind of fear us, then maybe we're not doing our job by holding their feet to the fire. So I saw this video of Pierce Morgan, and he's holding a representative of the IDF accountable, and it's beautiful. It's just, so we're gonna watch this, and I don't even know if I need to comment on it because you'll see it, and this is exactly like what I expect every journalist to treat pretty much every government official, and that would include libertarians. So if like we got a libertarian elected, let's say we sent a libertarian official, or somebody, an elected representative who is a libertarian on the Pierce Morgan show, I would expect this kind of treatment. Okay, so let's hear it.
How many civilians do you believe you've killed?
We don't have exact figures, as you know, it's the fog of war.
But you've got exact numbers for Hamas terrorists
media.
you've killed. Why wouldn't you know how many civilians you've killed?
Because obviously our focus is to go after the Hamas terrorists. And
hang on, I mean, that does imply that you're putting a bigger premium on killing Hamas terrorists in terms of numbers and accountability than you are on innocent civilians. That can't be right, surely. If you know exactly how many Hamas terrorists you've killed, you must know how many civilians you've killed. Otherwise, you're prioritizing the lives of terrorists over innocent people.
Piers, with respect, don't put words into my mouth, please. I didn't say exactly 14,000. I said around 14,000. Whereas Hamas will come out with precise numbers that statisticians
give me
will
a
look at.
ballpark number for civilians.
Well, you can use the ballpark as far as the Hamas figures, which I reject as being false.
Well, if they're false, why would you give me those?
I gave you the numbers that I had.
No, you told me you know how many Hamas terrorists you've killed, but you don't seem to have any idea how many civilians you've killed. I'm just bemused. Why wouldn't you keep count of both?
I don't have that information to give you, Piers. If I did, I would.
You literally no idea how many civilians you've been killing.
I can tell you definitively that our aim is to go after Hamas.
No,
We've done it successfully.
I'm sorry to push you on this. That's quite extraordinary. You're an official spokesman for the Israeli government, and you have no idea how many civilians you've killed. I thought you just told me that you were particularly careful about not killing civilians. But if you don't know how many you've killed, how can you say that with any certainty?
Because even if you were to go by a ratio of the Hamas figures, we would still be far ahead of any Western army.
That wasn't my question. You know it wasn't my question.
I don't have the information.
You literally have no idea how many civilians you've killed.
It's not that I don't know. I'm not authorized to give the information. I don't have the information.
That's complete nonsense. Why are you authorized to give me the number of terrorists you've killed and not a number of civilians? I don't understand.
That is the moment of beautiful, awkward silence. I'm pausing it right now. He's not, but it was a nice little pause there of like, and that's just beautiful. Imagine if we had, and this isn't even over. This has still got like 2 more minutes left, right? Imagine if every interview was this rough about virtually everything. It would just like, you got to the point where there was an awkward silence. Just amazing.
Can you explain?
Piers, we will go after Hamas. We will ensure that we.
You want me to believe you're being incredibly careful about how many civilians you're killing, and you have an amazing exemplary record, but you don't know how many civilians you're killing. So how do I know you've been careful?
Piers, when the dust settles, we will come out with the proper numbers. Hamas runs to the press daily with false.
When the dust settles, a lot of people will have died. And you know how many Hamas you've killed, but you don't know how many civilians you've killed. And I'm just asking you why. Why is it you've kept a record of one, but not the other?
I personally don't have that information to give to you. You can ask me over and over. I'm not going to come up with more information. I don't personally
you don't know.
I don't have that information for you.
But you're an official government spokesman for the Israeli government, and you have no idea.
Piers, I came on here to focus on what's going on with the war.
Well, actually, you came on here to answer my questions, I think.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer for you to that.
And I didn't intend to press you on this point because I assumed that you would not respond the way you have. But I've never had an Israeli spokesman who simply said, I have no idea. Particularly after you boasted about the fact that you've been very smart in the way you've avoided killing civilians. How do you know? You've got no idea how many you've killed.
Because I know the way in which the IDF operates.
I know
the way in which we go after the terrorists in the best possible way. It's not what I've said. It's what General Petraeus has said. It's what John Spencer from West Point has said. It's what multiple British generals have said. Israel goes out of its way to avoid civilian casualties. That's what we'll do. If you can point to me to another conflict by which they have evacuated, got out of harm's way civilians to the extent that Israel has done, then fine.
With respect, Mr. Hyman, how can you possibly expect me to accept any comparisons to any other conflict or war, given that you do not know how many civilians you've killed?
Piers, you understand that I can't prosecute the war over the media.
I'm just asking you for basic information. I'm not trying to trap you, and I'm not trying to unfairly harangue you. I think people are watching this and they'll make their own conclusions. I just find it astonishing that the moment I asked you how many Hamas you killed, you could tell me immediately. And the moment I ask you about civilians, you haven't got a clue, literally. You're not even prepared to issue a ballpark number. And I think people will find that staggering, particularly given that you are insistent that you're doing everything you can to avoid killing civilians. To which, again, I just simply ask, how do you know? If you don't know how many you're killing, how can you possibly be sure that you are A, doing better than other people waging war elsewhere, or B, that you have any idea how many you're killing? You don't, clearly.
That was just an amazing 4 minutes. I loved it, and I would love to see more of it. To every politician or spokesperson should should be, like, sweating before they get to the interview, knowing it's gonna be tough. I hope I'm ready. You know how you feel when you're trying to get a job and you go into an interview and it's a place that especially if you're on the younger side. Like if you're a little bit older and over a few decades you've had a few interviews under your belt, then yeah, you might feel a little bit more confident. But when you're a little bit on the younger side and maybe you're trying to score that really really good job and you're just super nervous, like I remember going to a job interview once and I was just in there and I was nervous and I was like, what are they going to ask me? I hope I'm ready. And I'm like trying to go through my mind, like all the things that I had prepared to say and how I was prepared to respond and all this good stuff. And then of course they asked me everything else. That's how that's how we should make them feel. Maybe even worse, right? Like I don't want to compare a job interview to interviewing somebody about the state of a war and whether or not you're killing civilians. So I'm not trying to make this comparison and devalue the lives of civilians that are being killed. What I'm trying to say is they should feel uncomfortable before they even get there. And they should anticipate, like, I'm going to be asked tough questions. There is a local reporter here in Jacksonville that likes to refer to himself as the most hated man in Jacksonville. I'm not going to tell you his name, but if you know, you know. He will sometimes I see him on social media or I'll read his articles, and sometimes it sounds like he's, supporting the Democrats, right? He's hitting the Republicans hard. And sometimes it sounds like he's hitting the Democrats hard, and maybe he's more on the Republican side. And then there are times where it seems like he's hitting both of them, or his arguments seem very libertarian. And I'm like, well, that's something I could get on board with. And he seems to have like he'll joke or maybe it's not even a joke, but he'll say that he doesn't like politicians. So I've seen him say that. That's the kind of journalist that I want. I want a journalist that's like, I don't like any of you politicians, and I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna give it to you rough, every one of you. Like nobody gets spared. And I mean that for even like libertarians. When we had 3 city council candidates, I told them, I was like, you better be prepared. And hopefully the media will give it to you and they'll be rough on you. And I want that. We should all want that. We should want to see interviews just like that on the day. It should be so routine. We should call it trad journalism. Like this is, I don't know if that's such a thing. I'm not a journalist, but we can think of it as like trad journalism. Remember what I just said about trad life? How it's kind of boring and routine? It should be the same thing, except for not boring, right? It should be kind of routine. It should be out of the ordinary to see a nice interview. Now, I don't mean like every single time somebody, like if you go on Jay Leno's show or something like that, somebody's where they're not really a journalist, where it's like maybe a podcast or a show. If you're on Joe Rogan or something, like Joe Rogan isn't really a journalist. He's just a podcaster who happens to ask really good questions and has a lot of interesting guests on. So I don't expect that Joe Rogan's going to, run them through the ringer per se. But when it comes to journalists, people who identify as a journalist, they're the ones that go out and investigate things and they report facts to people. Those people, we should always be expecting to see a very tough interview, no matter who it is. And we should sometimes have trouble identifying where does this journalist sit politically. We should have a little bit of trouble with that. We should sometimes go, well, I think they're leaning a little bit more left, but man, they've been really hammering the Democrats lately. Or we could say, hey, I don't think they're libertarian, but man, they're making some really good libertarian arguments lately. Like that's the kind of journalist that I want to see. And I will respect them, even if they're even if they're tough on me or my candidates, me as the chair of a party, right? Like be tough. Good. Do it. And don't hold back. Just as long as you do it to everyone. All right. What else we got here? We've got, oh, this would have been a good, this next video would have been good for Pierce Morgan or somebody like Pierce Morgan. So let's watch this. This is the I believe the governor of North Carolina talking about public schools. So let's check this out.
For the last few years, extreme Republicans have waged war on public schools.
Okay, so right there, if I were a journalist, I would be like, what do you mean extreme Republicans? Like, are there not extreme Republicans? And what do you mean by waging war? Are they coming? Are they showing up with AR-15s, with weapons of war? We have this crazy mentality to talk about everything in the most bombastic way. Like he leads, he's really starting, he's like, whoa, these extreme Republicans waging war. Like, good Lord, like what? Like, are they in the trenches? Are they shooting people? What's going on here? Or maybe he's just leading with very exaggerated hyperbolic language. Let's continue.
And their teachers. They're choking the life out of our schools that educate most of our children.
They're choking the life out of our schools. That's pretty impressive language here. Like, again, strong language. Okay, great. Then I'm going to assume that he's got very strong evidence. So when you hear somebody, a politician talking, and they're using very strong language, expect strong, very strong evidence to support it, right? Makes sense. Let's see.
The children who will become our next generation of construction workers, engineers, teachers, bankers, clerks, truckers, nurses, and ministers. They've concocted a myth that public schools are failing our students.
Okay, cool. There's a myth, he says, that they're failing our students. Now, that's kind of weird because we continually hear about, oh, these schools need more money. We can't educate. But somehow, despite the fact that regularly across many states, virtually every state, in many cities, we hear the trumpet of, we need more money. We need more money. We can't do our jobs without more money. But somehow there's no failure happening despite the fact that there's a lack of money. We'll see.
I have it twisted. Legislators are failing our public schools. This legislature has led the race to the bottom. They invest nearly $5,000 less per student than the national average.
Okay, so that may be a fact. I'm not going to dispute it. But what he needs to do is identify, why is the national average the standard? And just for the record, the amount of money that's spent per student in North Carolina contributes to the national average. So it's a little weird to say, like, well, we're under the national average. Well, you're contributing to the national average as well. So it's kind of weird to use that as a metric. You might say, like, hey, we spend this much money per student, and this other state over here spends this much money per student, and look at the results they're getting. Now that would be a comparison. But to use this weird, the number that contributes to the national average is under the national average. Well, somebody has to be, because the average, unless everybody was spending the exact same amount, then the average would mean that some are spending more and some are spending less. That's how an average works. Anyway.
We're falling behind nationally in teacher pay, dropping to 38th in the most recent rankings just released last week. They refuse to properly pay veteran teachers or teachers with master's degrees.
Okay, so let's stop here. So, okay, 38th. Okay, fair enough. That's a reasonable argument to make. Now, I don't know that it stands completely, but it's reasonable. But veteran teachers? Okay, well, like, shouldn't it just be teachers? Just teacher pay? Like, why do veteran teachers do better jobs at teaching? Or is he just appealing to our sense of patriotism in this country? Right. And I think that's what he's doing. I don't think he's actually making an argument that would say, well, veteran teachers by far statistically are better teachers than non-veteran teachers. That would be absurd. But if he has evidence of it, then fine, present it. Let's see what else he got.
And one study shows that 49 states make more of a financial effort to support public schools than North Carolina. And it's truly remarkable the success our schools are having given the lack of funding.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. That was it. Okay, that was it. Well, okay. He said it's remarkable the success they're having with the lack of funding. So why is he complaining about the lack of funding if they're having great success? It doesn't make sense. I think he's just feeding people a bunch of nonsense, and this is just another way to get more money and to politically grandstand. And he needed somebody like Pierce Morgan to hold, I know this was just like a public press conference or something like that, but he needs to be interviewed by somebody like Pierce Morgan did in the interview we just watched so that he could say, "Hey, wait a minute. Why this? Why this? Why this?" And why do we need more money? Why are we having a conversation about this in the first place if there are such great successes? If the Republicans are totally concocting a myth that there's a public school failure and it's not and this failure is not happening, you're having a lot of success. Why are we having a conversation? Why are you using such strong language? Why would you say they're waging war? Because guess what? If they're waging war, whatever that means, and they're still having success in schools, then their war isn't very good. So it doesn't matter. Okay, so what? They're waging war. We're still doing good. So whatever. Hey, teacher pay is, the number 38th. But hey, guess what? We got great results. Okay. Oh, we're below the national average. But guess what? We still got great results. Or he's lying about the great results. And you notice he didn't actually tell you any details about those results. He didn't tell you how many graduates they have, how many students go on to college, how many students go on to get PhDs, how many, anything. He gave you no details. And you might remember that I'm trying to remember what episode it was, but I did an episode, it was probably about 10 episodes ago. And I talked about public education. And I went back and I talked about the M Street School. Now, the M Street School, when you study it, they had like an 80-year period where they were really just hitting hard. They were underfunded, and they did a great phenomenal job. Like, who talks like that? What kind of geez, I need to work on. Anyway, they did a phenomenal job at delivering results. And then Thomas Sowell, he compiled those results, and they listed like this many students, went on to college. This happened, this happened, this happened. Here are some of the first that came out of that school. And this was an underfunded black college, or not college, black high school in like the early 1900s. So this was like when it was okay, if you will, to be racist. Like you would not lose your job. Nobody was, you would not be sent to HR's office if you were racist at this time. You could say the N word. You didn't need a pass. Like it was totally acceptable at this time. This school was underfunded. It was a minority school. It was all black students, and yet they still managed to deliver. Okay, that and when you look at that school, you can quickly go and say what was good about that school. Why was this school so good? You don't say it was good just because they had success. You specifically identify that success and you say, this is the success that they had. And then you list it out by the numbers. So I think people like the North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, he needs to have his feet held to the fire by some good journalist that's going to be like, well, wait a minute. Let me ask you some questions on what you just said. Let me make you a little uncomfortable, like Pierce made the IDF spokesperson uncomfortable, because that is routine. Okay. It's routine. That's what we do. That's what people are expecting. That's what they want to see. All right. Last item on the list, the RFK. So yesterday I talked about Donald Trump, and he is coming to the Libertarian Party National Convention to speak. Well, RFK threw out an interesting, he made things a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen. And I'm going to read to you his tweet that he put out, because it got a lot of conversation yesterday. I'll tell you that much. There was a lot of conversation going on. So here's his tweet, and let me go ahead and read it for you. It's not too terribly long. Dear President Trump, I'm grateful to you for calling attention to the rigged polling methodologies that biased DNC influenced media have used against you. We have this concern too, and I'm happy to show you the deceptive methodologies used by DNC allied pollsters who pretend that I'm in single digits. You have correctly characterized these as fake polls. This is why we did our own poll with Zogby, the largest and most accurate poll of this election cycle. We had Zogby ask about head to head matchups: one, you versus President Biden; two, me versus President Biden; three, me versus you. The results: you beat President Biden handily. I crush him as well by even more. And against each other, I beat you in a nail biter. In a three-way, you are ahead, but I'm coming up strong. Two new polls, CNN and Quinnipiac, have me above the 15% debate threshold. Another active vote has me at 26% among young voters. And you and I are tied among Americans' 70 million independents. I'm also drawing a lot of voters from your former supporters. They are upset that you blew up the deficit, shut down their businesses during COVID, and filled your administration with swamp creatures. So I'd like to make you an offer. We're both going to be speaking at the upcoming Libertarian Convention on May 24th and 25th. It's perfect neutral territory for you and me to have a debate where you can defend your record for your wavering supporters. You yourself have said you're not afraid to debate me as long as my poll numbers are decent. Well, they are. In fact, I'm the only presidential candidate in history who has polled ahead of both major party candidates in head to head races. So let's meet at the Libertarian Convention and show the American public that at least two of the major candidates aren't afraid to debate each other. I asked the convention organizers, and they are game for us to use our time there to bring the American people the debate they deserve. Sincerely, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Awesome. This got a lot of conversation going yesterday, and it is all over the place. So here's what I happen to say about that. And I'm not going to put it up on the screen. I'll just tell you what I said. Let me get to that. Where did you go here? I said, if LP National accepts, which it sounded like they already did, which I'm okay with, then it should only be if our nominee is included. No ifs, ands, or buts. Period. That's it. Now, why would I say that? Here's the thing. We are still a political party. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there, they've got this kind of idea like, oh, we should just use our party for messaging and blah, blah. Stop. Stop right there. We are a political party. That is how people see us, even if they ignore us. When we talk to people, we don't introduce ourselves and say, we're the libertarian communicators. We say, we're the Libertarian Party. And we introduce ourselves often to introduce a candidate. And with the Libertarian Party, so and so is running for this office. This is how the public understands political party to operate. We run candidates. We also have candidates that we run at the national level, which in some way helps out our down ballot candidates. These candidates, in some cases, they contribute to ballot access in certain states, not New York, because New York just constantly changes things, but they and not in Florida, because we've already secured ballot access a long time ago through different means. So we don't have the ballot access challenges that other states have. But many of them do, and they rely on, and I think sometimes it's like the governor or higher. It varies, I think, from state to state. But effectively, some of these higher level candidates contribute to the ballot access that the down ballot candidates, the ones that like city council, mayor, those kind of things, they depend upon that ballot access. And again, we talk about we're the Libertarian Party. And it's even in our bylaws that we run candidates. We seek to move public policy. It's listed there in our purpose. Okay. So in our formal documents. So it makes sense that at our convention, where we're explicitly going to do two major things. One, business. This is where we handle things like bylaws and stuff like that. And then two, where we elect candidates to represent us. Now we do that on two fronts. We elect our candidates, our officers who run the party to represent us, and also our at-larges and folks. So we elect our LNC members, and we elect on every other election cycle or every other convention, we elect our president and vice president nominees. And these are the people that we send out to try to win, but more importantly, to present a message and try to get the poll number, their votes high enough to assist with ballot access. Right. So that's what we do. We send them out. And this year is one of those years. We're going to have like 5 or 6, I don't know exact number, but like 5 or 6 candidates will be there. And they are vying. They have been spending money and their time going out to different conventions and events and raising money, producing media, giving speeches, going on podcasts. They've been doing all of this stuff. And now they will be at the convention hoping that the delegates, roughly 1,000 delegates, will vote for them. Each one is like, hey, I hope to win. I hope to be the nominee. And then we'll do the same thing for the vice president. We'll elect the vice president. And then we will send them out into the world like little missionaries and say, please go out and spread liberty. So it makes sense that we would say, okay, we've already invited you. I'm fine with that. I've already made my argument. You can see yesterday's episode. So now we've got this debate challenge. Okay, cool. I'm okay with that too, as long as it includes our candidates, because we are a political party. This is our event. It's our house. It would be weird if after 50 years of not being able to get on the debate stage, that we ensured that our own candidates couldn't get on the debate stage that was held at our convention. That would be a weird thing to do. And I don't think it would, I don't think it's going to, if that happens. And again, this is all speculation because nobody's made any, like I read what RFK has said, and he has, he has made his challenge, and he has indicated that the debate, the convention organizers are okay with it. He doesn't really give the details, so it's unclear at this moment what's happening behind the scenes. I'm okay with some things being talked about in private and not necessarily everything in public. Okay, so fine on that. But again, we still have a purpose. We still have people that are fulfilling that purpose. And if we start if we devalue ourselves down to, oh, we're just going to be a debate forum for the big two, and we're not going to fight to get our own candidate in there, then I think that's going to demoralize a lot of people. Because I want you to think about, we got 5 or 6 people that are running campaigns. They've been running campaigns for over a year. I want you to think about all the volunteers that are supporting them. Volunteers that are actively in the campaign or simply on social media, spreading the word to everybody else and saying, this is why you ought to vote for my guy. Okay. I want you to think about that for a second. I want you to think about all the candidates that have run at, that maybe aren't president and vice president nominee, right? Like maybe they're running for Senate, whether it's Congress, or whether it's for their state Senate. Want you to think about all the people that have run for mayor, for city council, for dog catcher, whatever. Okay. I want you to think about, what is the message that we're sending, that we would bring in, that we've been fighting the duopoly this whole time. And then we basically bring them in. I realize that RFK he's a Democrat. Come on. He was a Democrat. He's just switched over because they weren't playing nice, but he's a Democrat. So we bring in the duopoly only to not fight for our candidates. And if they're not willing, if they're saying like, look, no, like I only want to debate Trump, and let's say Trump says I'll only debate RFK, then tell them no. Just like the quote at the top of the show, right? Focusing is about saying no. Sometimes you have to be willing to walk away. And if we're not willing to walk away, salespeople, back me up. What does that mean? What does that tell people when you're not willing to walk away? That you're the desperate one. We're not desperate. We shouldn't act like it if we are, right? Like never let them see you sweat. Did anybody else grow up in the 90s and remember any of these quips and garbles that we supposedly thought were great, and which in many cases were? And then we grow up and then we We act different, like, oh man, we've never had this. We better just take every opportunity we can without any reservation. No, we should identify what we're about and we should focus on that and draw a line and say, hey, we're good with doing something out of the box, but that doesn't mean that we have to accept every single demand of yours. This is a negotiation. Sometimes negotiations end in saying no. And that's what we should do. We should absolutely support the idea. Say, hey, now, and look, I'm just going to kind of say kudos to the LNC, to whoever, I think it was Angela and others who who went forward to try to get Trump, and I guess they've had negotiations with RFK as well. Kudos to them for that. Like yesterday, what did I say? Opportunities are created. You create opportunities. But just because you create an opportunity doesn't mean that the opportunity should drive you. That means you are still the driver. You're creating the opportunity. You control it. And we should control that in the context of what's it going to be like for our candidates next year, the year after that, and so on and so forth. What precedent are we setting? Are we setting the precedent that we'll just agree to anything, that we don't say no to anything? Well, guess what? That just makes us a nice little dirty dish rag. That means that they can just wipe around with us because we've shown that we're not going to say no. Why aren't we saying no? Well, because we've never gotten this before. And when we finally got a chance, we just took it all like a little child. No, it's time to be adults. It's time to make some tough decisions. And sometimes that tough decision will say, look, we invited you to speak and a debate challenge was thrown out there. But if it doesn't include our candidate and we can't work it out and you can't work it out so that it includes our candidate, then it doesn't happen. And we're holding fast to that. Because at the end of the day, we still have a responsibility to our party, our candidates, and our members. Now, I want to address something because I've seen this float around a lot and I've kind of been critical of it. So I want to point out something, and I'm not, this is not to say to anybody in specific. Okay. So I'm not like I know you might see certain people saying, I'm not taking a jab at them. I'm taking a jab at this idea. Okay. I see this thing that says, whenever there's criticism, people say, well, you're just allergic to relevance. Okay. No, some people, yes. If the answer is no, 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 we should only do things the old way, the way that we've done it for years. That's a fine argument to make. You're allergic to relevance. Come on, step up your game, get with the program, right? But if you're just saying yes to everything, you're not being relevant. All you're doing is being a lapdog. We should at some point have a goal in mind. That's what an organization should do. That is why Steve Jobs made Apple so successful, because there were times that he was willing to say, no, we're not doing this. Same thing with Microsoft and any other organization that has had great success. At some point, they said no. And if you watch famous people, they will turn down things and they will say, look, because, hey, one, not everything is aligned with what goal I'm trying to accomplish, or I don't have time for everything. So you have to say no to some. The people that say yes to everything, they're not successful. So we need to see that there's a no somewhere. That's my argument. Like at some point, people need to know what our goal is. And our goal should not look like, man, we're just going to take everything we can totally get because we've never had it before. No, now we're getting some relevance. Let's act like adults that have it. All right, folks, that was my show. Hope you enjoyed it. It is time for me to go. I want to thank you for watching. Hope you found the episode informative and inspiring. I want you to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for a informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com or rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.